preparation is part of the president's responsibilities. That's the last thing that we mention, and you'll find that the budget's going to make you kind of upset. And here's the deal: America, we spend a lot of money, all right? And so here's the thing: Congress, technically, they're in charge of passing bills that allocate money every year and set up a budget. But the president's got to approve it, so they've got to work together on this, okay? And so the budget, all right, this year, and we're going with the regular budget right now, but remember too, we're getting ready to pass a COVID relief bill that's going to add a lot of extra spending, all right? And by the way, this marker smells really good. Not that I'm encouraging smelling markers, all right? So this year, America plans to spend, we've budgeted $4 trillion, give or take a few. That's a lot of money, okay? Trillion with a T. That's a lot of trailing zeros, kids. It's like 15 zeros. Wow. All right. So we spend a crap ton of money, but the real question is, what do we spend it on? All right. What are the major things? Like, let me ask you this. Okay. For example, what percentage of the overall budget you think gets spent on education? You're like, wow, you're going that low? What about like arts and sciences? Gosh, you guys do not. You're not. What about the military? All right, you figured out one thing for sure. The military is going to take up about 20% of the budget. All right, 20% is going to be devoted to the military. We got to blow stuff up, man. All right, and we're going to spend about $800 billion on the military this year. Now, that's pretty significant considering China is the second leading country in terms of military expenditures, and they only spend like 160, 170 billion. Okay? So we're at least 3 times better than China. Yeah, we do. We do. We spend a lot of money, but there are reasons why. Okay. So we're going to spend a lot of money on the military. All right. Now, the next biggest expenditure, okay, and this is a huge chunk. About 55% of our budget goes towards what we call entitlement programs. All right. And there are 3 major entitlement programs. Kate White, you probably know one, don't you? Give me a guess. What's a major program that America spends money on? I'll give you a hint. It benefits, what is it? What's the specific program? Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are the 3. Those 3 programs are huge expenditures. I just tried to list Medicare twice, but that's okay. All right? It's Friday afternoon. Social Security. And 2 of those programs benefit old people. All right. Now, literally 75 cents out of every dollar the American government spends is already accounted for. Okay. Now, they call those entitlement programs because literally, if you meet the qualifications, you're entitled to it. All right. And it's a little bit different. So let's say Trisha, when she gets really old and becomes 65 and eligible for Social Security, let's say the government has calculated her career earnings and things like that, and they calculate that she will get $2,000 a month in Social Security. Okay? They can't shortchange her one month and say, well, we're a little short this month, so we're only going to give you $1,800. They're not allowed to do that. By law, they have to pay her what they owe her. Okay? She's entitled to it. How does it feel to be entitled? Yay! Look, they call this generation the entitlement generation. No, it's really the baby boomers. All right? They're the ones that are entitled. And they're like, you're darn right. All right, I'm not giving old people a hard time. I kind of am, though. All right, now, that leaves us with only 25% of the budget for everything else, the other stuff. If I can spell correctly today. 25% for the other stuff. Now, the other stuff includes a lot of things. 1, education. And you guys, you're so smart and so cynical. Education usually accounts for like 1.5 to 2.5% of the budget. Why is it, do you think, the government spends so much money on old people, but not on education. They are old people, but there's something else. Old people vote. You all are helpless in terms of voting. It's just now that you're starting to become real citizens, right? Arts and sciences. Arts and sciences, including research, museums, etc. If you like going to those, the federal government gives money to them. A lot of museums and science research couldn't make it on its own. No, and I'll tell you why. Not what you would think. Okay? The arts and sciences, foreign aid. Foreign aid, we give money to other countries. Now, a lot of people are like, Mr. Scleets, why are we giving billions of dollars every year to foreign countries? And the answer is you're getting something in return. All right? Building a friendly relationship with a nation like Israel, for instance, like, why would we be super friendly to Israel? We don't have a military base there, but you're at least thinking on the right track. All right, perhaps a potential ally in a conflict. Or how about this? Uh, who do we rely on for information about terrorism? Israel is one of them because a lot of Muslim nations surrounding Israel don't like them. And we're like, hey, we'll give you money. And it's a way to leverage people in the future. If Israel or other countries we give aid's a problem to, what do we threaten them with? Cutting off their money. And that can be, and granted, you don't go to that immediately, but if you wanted something bad enough, you could threaten to take it away. So you're buying something with your money, you're building a relationship. Okay? Welfare programs, because you're not entitled to it. Welfare spending is not an entitlement. All right? So things like SNAP, all right, so just supplemental nutrition assistance, what we call food stamps, TANF, temporary assistance for needy families. Uh, a lot of those programs have limits to them that you are not entitled to them for forever. Like Social Security, 65 and older, you're going to get it the rest of your life. All right? TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, there are strict limits on that. Maybe, yes. WIC is part of that as well. Okay? And so welfare programs take up like 7 to 8% of the budget. All right? They're not that much, but they're part of that other. Welfare programs, foreign aids, arts and sciences, education. We'll also put up on this other list other social programs. CIA's got its own little special budget, but I don't know if that's considered. I doubt that would be considered military spending, though. All right, one other thing, and I'm glad you mentioned that. It made me think of something else here, too. Federal employees' salaries. Okay? Federal employees' salaries. Remember, we got 2 million federal employees. So we got to pay these people. All right? Now, this is a lot of other stuff here. Okay, sir? That's in military spending. Okay? Now, here's the thing. All right? The entitlements, we call those programs mandatory spending. All right? That's mandatory spending because, like I said, you have to pay that. All right? But the rest of it, though, your military and your other stuff, we refer to that as discretionary. It's approximate. Now, here's the problem, one of the problems with the budget every year, Trish. In 1935, when Social Security was implemented, what was the average lifespan of an American compared to now? It was about early 70s, I think 73 or 74, and now it's like 78, 79. So what would happen is you, like for example, Social Security, you might pay into it for decades, but you'd only collect benefits for a couple years, and then you die. All right? The problem is, though, is that what do we know about old people? They're living longer, which means what are they doing to the system? They're draining it. they're taking out as much as they put in, if not more. All right? That's an issue. God, the government looks at people like me. They hope I die early because they're like, Scalise has been paying into Social Security for a while. Because if I die today, like, guess what happens to all the money I put into Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid? Yeah, the government just keeps it. Now, granted, when you get older, your spouse, and sometimes if you're early, depending on your life situation, your children, your dependents, will get payments from Social Security to help offset, the income that you would have provided. So there are things like that, but by and large, that money you'll never get back. And think about this too: you pay money for Medicaid, and hopefully, as an adult, you never need it. Like, hopefully, you're never low income to the point where you need to sign up for Medicaid. So that's a program that you pay into that you're never going to benefit from. Yes, neither. Hang on, we're going to get to that. Okay. Now, here's the thing: if you wanted to change programs like Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, what would happen if you're a member of Congress and you stand up and say, I propose that we change Social Security, that 65 is no longer the retirement age, it's going to be 70? They're going to be furious. Okay. They're going to be very upset. All right. And by the way, remember who comes out to vote? It's the old folks. All right. They would be very upset about that. All right. And by the way, Democrats, they love to spend your money on social programs, and they would be upset. Now, if you came out and said, I think we need to spend less money on the military, what would Republicans say about you? They would be like, hey, you don't support the troops. Why do you hate America? Like, do you want us to be weak? Oof. All right. And that's a problem. Okay. So nobody wants to change the laws on this. And people definitely don't want to reduce your spending on the military. Okay. So that means the other is going to have to potentially suffer in the budget. Now, something else that's a problem too: Medicare and Medicaid, government programs for healthcare spending. What do we know about healthcare every year? Does it get more expensive or less expensive? More expensive, and older people are living longer. So this year it takes up about 55% of the budget, all right? But next year it'll probably accumulate a little bit more. And in 10 years it'll probably take up 60% of the budget, all right? These programs, by the way, Medicare and Medicaid, didn't exist till the 60s. So we have a budget problem, okay? And we're trying to pay for all this different stuff. And think about this: if we didn't have entitlement programs, we'd be able to help out young people in a lot of ways. Gosh, you all would never have to pay for college. You're like, that's great. What a tragedy indeed. You'd never appreciate it. All right. Now, here's the thing: how do we pay for all this stuff? Where does our taxes? Yeah. Incidentally, I thought of this today. Taxes is just one set of transposed letters away from Texas. All right. Not that that's relevant, but I thought I would tell you anyway. Hmm. All right. So tax dollars are going to pay for this right here. And this year we're going to bring in, and this is a ballpark figure, about $3.7 trillion in taxes. Okay. Now, what is the biggest tax that accounts for a lot of this money that's going to come in? Income tax. Okay. About half of all tax dollars are going to come from the income tax, personal income tax. And if you've had a job, okay, if you've had a job, then you know that income tax is a big deal. All right. And how many people, the first time you saw your paycheck, you're like, oh my gosh, why do they take all this stuff from me? Oof. You're like, gosh. All right. But that's not the only place where we get money from. We also pay what are called payroll taxes. Those are the specific taxes for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. You'll see them listed on there as well. Social Security pays, it's like 6%, takes 6% of your salary and puts it towards Social Security. Hmm. And then we have corporate taxes. Businesses have to pay taxes as well. A lot of people think we should be raising taxes on them. Corporate taxes. Businesses have to pay taxes. And last but certainly not least, you got luxury taxes. Taxes on things like tobacco and cigarette, things that you don't necessarily need. That's why they call them luxuries. Okay? Question. No, they would not be like clothes are not luxury items. But like here in West Virginia, you'd have to pay a sales tax on it. Sir. Yes. Like here's an example. Gasoline here in West Virginia. Like let's say right now, gasoline's like $2.70 a gallon. Uh, but if you go over to Ohio, you can get it significantly cheaper. There's a federal tax on gasoline, and there's also a state one. Like it's like I think the federal government adds 35 cents to every gallon, and the state of West Virginia adds like 55 cents to every gallon. So, you're paying a huge chunk of change in that, like for every gallon of gas, you're paying a good bit of money for on taxes in that too, and it's included in the price. Now, if you notice right here, in this right here, we have $3.7 trillion in taxes and $4 trillion budgeted to spend. That's a problem because, Kate, if I go to the store and it says that I have to pay $10 for my food and I only have $8, what happens? I can't get it all, man. I gotta change something. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Like I can't help it. I want the Arby's sandwiches. No, come on. We all been there. All right. So we got a shortfall here. Right. So we have a budget problem, and we're in the hole. We need 300 billion extra dollars. I'm sure we can just scour the couches and look for loose change. Right. Now we're short 300 billion. What could we do to the budget? We could shrink or cut the budget. But remember, we've already established that that's going to be difficult to do because Democrats don't want you to touch social programs, Republicans don't want you to touch military, and there's probably no way you could cut this. Heck, education's already been cut to the bone, right? So you can't cut a lot of that stuff. What could we do instead of cutting the budget? What could we do to taxes? We could increase taxes, right? Who wants to be the member of Congress who stands up and says, I think we should increase taxes? No one does. All right. By the way, who are people, especially middle and low income people, saying we should tax? Tax the rich, tax the wealthy. All right. But here's the thing, though wealthy people already pay significantly higher tax rates than middle and lower class people in terms of their wealth. Wow, that's true. There used to be much higher tax rates. Okay, so we don't want to cut the budget because that means making hard decisions. We don't want to raise taxes, so that means making hard decisions too. So when we don't cut the budget or pay or raise taxes, where are we going to get this extra 300 billion from? Aha! We borrow it. Okay. Close. We're going to go a very general route here. All right. Now, when we say the government borrows money and it's going to borrow $300 billion this year, uh, what we mean is the government's going to sell government bonds. Okay. You can sell government bonds to a number of people. So, for example, like anybody ever bought a savings bond before? Yeah, if you buy a savings bond or like World War I, World War II, they sold war bonds to help fund the war, where you get a certificate, like let's say, Bailey, you pay $100 for a government certificate. And the government says in X number of years, we will pay you back the $100 plus interest. Guaranteed money. Okay? So basically, what you do is you loan the government money. Now, a lot of different entities can buy government bonds. All right. And so when the government says, when we need an extra 300 billion like we do right now, all right, we're going to sell bonds to a lot of different people. And some of the major buyers, like a lot of times private banks will buy government bonds, but foreign countries frequently buy government bonds. Yes. Yes, you can buy government bonds. You can buy what are called CDs, certificate of deposits, treasury bills. They just call them T-bills. You can buy a savings bond, and that's common stuff. And the longer you keep it, the more that you're going to make from it in the long run. Okay? But foreign countries will buy up government bonds too. Anybody take a guess which two countries buy government bonds more than anybody? Not a bad guess. UK's third, I think. China's one? Nope. Nope. You're in China, same location. Japan. Uh, those two countries are the countries who buy up government bonds the most. Now, like I said, you can buy government bonds at any time, but America says, look, sometimes we got to, sell a few more government bonds in order to generate some cash, right? Not quite that much, but it's a lot. All right, now hang on to that because you're going to see just how dangerous this can get. So let's say the 300 billion, okay, 2021, our budget, we're going to owe $300 billion. We're going to sell $300 billion worth of bonds. And, China and Japan and private banks will buy them because they're like, oh, America's pretty good credit rating. Okay. We know that we're going to have to pay this $300 billion back in the future plus interest. Now, can you imagine the interest that you would accumulate from $300 billion? I cringe looking at it. Okay. Now, here's the thing. It's going to take us time to pay this back. But we also know this. In 2022, we're going to have to borrow money again. Because remember, we don't like making the hard decisions about taxes or about the budget. So let's say next year, let's say it's not as bad next year. Let's say next year we only have to borrow $200 billion. All right. That means we still got to add it to the $300 billion that we already owe. Plus, as they say in the mob world, the juice is running, meaning that the interest is adding up. All right. Part of what we pay in this other right here, all right, and I didn't put this up here yet. Part of what we pay, interest on the national debt. We pay interest on the national debt because that $500 billion that we borrowed, you got to pay that, plus you got to make interest payments. Now, every year when we keep adding money to that pile that we owe, we call that our national debt. Anybody know what our national debt is right now? How much money in government bonds are out there? Oh, you guys are so lowballing it. Nah, that's a little high. More than 5 trillion. $28 trillion is the current national debt. Yeah. Now, that means there's $28 trillion in government bonds out there that are going to be redeemed at some point. Foreign countries own a decent amount of it. Private banks own it. Individual citizens own some of it. So, for example, like right now, China and Japan, Japan has about $1.3 trillion in government bonds that they own. So one day they're going to get that back. China has about $1 trillion in American government bonds that they own that they're going to get back plus interest. Sure. No, but here's what they can do. Okay. Trish said, can they just demand that money right now? The answer is from us, no, because you have to wait a certain time limit. Okay. So, if that time limit hasn't come yet, you can't demand the money. But what you can do, like let's say that this ball right here, stop. It's seven. We got 7 minutes. If you're at home, the intercom is ruining us. Let's say this ball represents $1 trillion in government bonds. Hold this ball. Okay. Now, you're like, man, I really would like my $1 trillion back because it's been a year and I still have to wait a couple years. All right. You can't demand that from me, but what you could do is take this ball, this debt, like this IOU paper, and sell it to Bailey. Okay. And Bailey says, look, I know you want your money now. Instead of $1 trillion, I'll give you 900 billion right now if you just go ahead and give me that. And you're like, you know what? I'll take the 900 billion. I'll eat the loss on it. And then Bailey stands to gain money from it. Okay? Countries like buying American bonds because America's never defaulted on their payments. We always pay back our government bonds plus interest. It did get downgraded once, but we still have never defaulted on a bond. Yes. You can go online to the U.S. Department of Treasury's website and buy one today. Now, you can buy, like I said, people can buy these bonds, but ultimately, a lot of times the big values, the big currency on it is going to be from countries who can buy large quantities. Let me show you something here before we go. Um, yeah, it's credit rating. I'll tell you about that in a second. There is the U.S. debt clock. Okay. The U.S. national debt is increasing as we go along, and it's over $28 trillion. Your debt per citizen, if every citizen could pay $84,848, we would be out of debt. We would pay all of our obligations. All right. Fun fact, it's gone up $3 today since this morning. Debt per taxpayer, and you're going to find out too. This has some other interesting little bits of information on it too. The U.S. population and the U.S. workforce. Think about this. We have 330 million people in the United States, but only 150 million of them are actually working. That's an issue. Okay. Now, once again, if you look at the board, our biggest issue is that we engage every year in what we call deficit spending, where we spend more than what we have, and we won't make the hard decisions. Now, here's what's really difficult. Every year we keep piling onto that national debt, and if we don't do something about it, what's going to happen every year? We're just going to add to it, and eventually a time will come where we won't be able to meet those obligations, right? And my generation has kicked the can down the road to your generation, so you all will have to come up with a potential solution